Welcome to Music Ed Tech Talk, a podcast about music, education, and technology. I'm your host, Robbie Burns. Before we kind of introduce some topics we might talk about, you have the floor. Do you want to introduce yourself? Like, what are the things that you think, are most important for people to know about you in this day?
Sure. I think the thing I want to start with is that I'm a music teacher. That's it. That's how I identify. That's how I will always consider myself. I'm a music teacher. I love music. It's my life's passion. It's my life's work. And the technology, which is what I'm kind of known for, or where my career kind of took a right turn, always has been a means to make music more engaging a subject to the students I taught. And, I went to Montclair State. I was a tuba player, keyboard player, wanted to be in a rock band, but didn't have that opportunity. I mean, I still play in rock bands, but, not gonna pay the mortgage with it. So I said, well, I can become a music ed major if I play the tuba. So I went ahead and did that. I had no real intention of going and becoming a teacher. I just wanted it to, quote unquote, fall back on so that my amazing performing career as a tuba player, could go forward. And like many students in the same boat, I decided, well, I think I should be a music teacher. The tuba playing doesn't pay all my bills. So my first job out of school was in an inner city school district in New Jersey. I was an elementary band director in multiple schools. And for many reasons, I knew right away it wasn't going to work. And it wasn't anything to do with the kids. It was more about the system and the really depressing part of, the kids who needed it the most, in my opinion, had the least available to them. And it was a hard decision, but I decided, I need to get into a school district where there's parent support, there's administration support, the kids show up to school. I wasn't cut out for it. It's definitely something I've thought about for years. But my second job was a pre-K to 8 general vocal instrumental teacher. And I'll be honest, it's not what I wanted to do. And my first day of school was like 7th grade, 7th grade general music. And I was like, oh, this is literally the last thing I ever wanted to do. And I found that I was in a very affluent school district. On the first day, I said to the principal, is there any way you guys would consider buying a music technology lab? And they said, sure, how much does it cost? And I was like, it's probably 30 grand. I don't know. I called my good friend Lee Whitmore, who was my teacher at the time at Soundtree, and he came to my school. It was just Lee and I, and we built a lab. And I found out, and a long story to get to this point, is that when I taught the same topics, the same concepts, the same composers, but I did it with technology, the kids were like totally into it. And when I did it without technology, they were like, this is really boring. And so I kind of, in my second year of teaching, realized that the thing that I loved, I was a synth composer, synth nerd, that the thing I loved outside of school was the thing that was the most engaging way to teach. And I spent 15 years in the New Jersey public schools teaching, and I almost always had some type of technology, a lab or a setup in my teaching situation. So I taught in 3 different districts. And while I was doing that, I did my graduate work at Columbia University's Teacher College. And I realized pretty quick when Lee Whitmore got graduated that they needed somebody to teach those tech classes that he was teaching. And so I started teaching in 1999 at the graduate level, teaching music tech and music education. So really since 1988, so 35 years I've been doing it. And it is a very rewarding career, being a music teacher in general. But the left turn or right turn I took 16 years ago into the corporate world, where I was given an opportunity to take over. Lee Whitmore is a huge mentor of mine, a very dear friend. And really the reason I'm talking to you today, Robbie, is that without Lee, I wouldn't be where I am. At the time, Lee was running Soundtree. When he left Soundtree in 2007, he said, Jim, I would like you to take it over if you're interested in leaving teaching, going to the corporate world. And everyone told me don't do it, but I did it. And it's the greatest thing I've ever done because I got to get to a much wider audience of teachers And I feel that my impact as a music educator, trying to convince the masses that music technology can be a really great way to teach and to get kids all 360-degree holistic part of music education. The full holistic musician can be addressed through technology. Of course, it requires excellent teaching, excellent pedagogy. Without a really good teacher, the technology is useless, in my opinion. But the arc of my career, 35 years in now, is that I'm just still teaching music, but I'm helping other teachers teach those kids using music technology. So I started at Soundtree in the corporate world, and then I've been running MusicFirst since 2012. And we've got over 2 million kids on a daily basis using our platform. It's really gratifying, exciting, rewarding. I feel like I did what I set out to do, and I'm looking forward to a future. I'm not going anywhere. The company's doing really well. We keep growing, we keep expanding, we get more staff members, we're in more countries. It's a lot of fun, and I love what I do, and I love talking about music ed, especially with like-minded folks like you, Robbie.
Introduction, amazing.
Sorry, I went on there for a bit, but I think teachers need to hear that it's, especially for me, that being a music teacher is the most important thing, in my opinion, the most important position in a school. You're the Pied Piper, and it's really rewarding. And it's sometimes, I'm sure there are days where your listeners come home and they go, "It's not that great, Jim. It's not that great, Robbie." In the sum of its parts, it's one of the most rewarding careers there is.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I mean, I know this about you, and people who listen to this show repeatedly know where I'm at. But it is worth repeating for anyone who feels that way, or is maybe in particular a little scared of the technology. Like, these technology is out there. Good technology is always here to solve a problem, not to search for one. And I think, and for me, being primarily still up in the traditional performing arts, a lot of my technology use is actually just how I'm sort of like supplementing my own personal workflows for being more structured and organized and solid as a teacher. But of course, as a general music teacher and as someone who's just generally interested in keeping my ear to the ground on what's happening, I'm also keeping up with things that involve teaching music in styles of music where technology is native to the creation of that. And you're here, and your tools and MusicFirst support all of those kinds of avenues of music instruction. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, was, of course, to talk about MusicFirst. But there's also, we're recording in November, but there's going to be one other episode that's going to release before this one. And I think that when this one releases, it'll be close enough to the end of the year that I thought it would be kind of fun to cover some recent, but maybe also like look back on the past year and maybe just cover some news topics, but some things that have happened in music education technology, many of which have involved MusicFirst. I mean, I can't even keep up with all the announcements and integrations MusicFirst is doing. So I mean, we have a shared note. We've got a bunch in there that maybe we can kind of go through one by one, and then add, and then maybe talk about, I don't know if we can sneak some of these other topics in here too. But like, is that cool if we go in that order? Start with.
Oh, absolutely, sure.
Before we kind of go at these more recent things, because these are some of these little areas in my little news area of the note are things that I've just been like kind of storing up in here as I've seen them pop up on my radar. Do you feel like in 2023, like we've been back, we've kind of had this like online learning moment a couple years back, but we've been like, many schools have been in person for years now since then. Where do you feel like, I mean, like can you give an opening statement on like the state of music education technology in 2023? Is there anything that you feel like defines where it's at right now, or like where it's going?
Sure. I think it's important to look back at what we've just been through. I won't mention the word because I don't want to hear it again. But, in March of 2020, every music teacher went kicking and screaming into the world of music technology. And it was one of my goals to make that happen, but certainly not the way I wanted it to happen. And what's happened since then is that some teachers could not wait to get back to the way they used to do it and say goodbye to all the technologies that helped facilitate their instruction when they couldn't meet with their students in person. And so what we saw, and I'll be really candid, and I will say, although others might not be so candid, is that what ed tech, especially in music, saw was this massive spike in usage, sale. We had the greatest year ever in 2020 from a sales standpoint. although the world was going, to pot. And then there's been a correction. There's been a giant correction where a lot of people, we got them through, or music technology, whether it was Flipgrid, whether it was Google Classroom, Zoom, whatever it was that got them through that, the minute they were able to get back to quote unquote normal. But that's not the case for everybody. What I saw is that firsthand is that about 40% of the teachers that never used it before actually found something they liked. And it wasn't necessarily, and I think it's really important. Yeah, I run a company, but it's more about what the students are doing with it that makes me excited. And what I think a lot of teachers realize is their kids are really creative. Yeah, they're really good at band, choir, and orchestra. That's what we do really well here in the U.S. But there's a lot of creative kids out there. And when given the opportunity to look at other aspects of music, like, music theory, fundamentals, individual practice, personalized learning, and then creative expression, I think some teachers have said these things like DAWs, digital audio workstations, are pretty cool. These kids really went right to them, gravitated to them. I didn't know I had so many kids that did, producing and DJing and all these types of things. So what I would say the current state and where we are right now is on the bleeding edge of AI integration. And I'm sure we'll talk a bit about that. It's what I've been obsessed with since I first saw ChatGPT over a year ago. And that's definitely the direction that things are heading. And I have lots of things that I can share with you where my predictions are. But where we are right now, in my opinion, through what I see on a daily basis, is that technology integration has never been more, into music education. That's probably a better way to say it. But there's a lot more tech being used in the instruction, and when teachers are teaching, in the assessment of their students' learning, and, a lot of great software tools that are out there to help kids explore all aspects of what it is to be a musician. So it's a really exciting time right now, and the people who are with us now are kind of the converted, and the people who've been saying all along this stuff is great. And so there's never been a better time to be a teacher with music technology, in my opinion. It's like a very exciting year. 2023 has been amazing.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, these news headlines I dumped in here, to whatever degree they do or do not fit that overall idea, I guess we can kind of go at them one by one. The first thing I have in here, which I haven't covered too much on the show, is that Soundtrap was sold back to its original owners. And should I make meaning of that? Is there well, what I can do, and I can't share too much because I know a lot more than I should, but what I think is the most important thing is that this is a really good thing for music teachers specifically. When a large company like Spotify, which is behemoth, buys a much smaller company like Soundtrap, there's often what is going to happen to this beloved software? And while Spotify did a lot of great things for the software, it was not necessarily a music educator focused company. Not Soundtrap, but Spotify. And the folks at Soundtrap, who I've worked with now for 7 years, are amazing. They are committed. They love what they do. They're really smart people. And some of them left and some of them moved on when the sale happened. But the core group that's there that I've been working with for years now are amazing. And the ownership pair, Emanuelson, is all in now on, Soundtrap in schools. And I think that kind of focus or refocus for the company is a very good thing. And there's a lot of great stuff coming down the track. So I'm thrilled that the original owners took it back, and very excited what the future holds for them. That's exciting to hear and probably reassuring for anyone who maybe had concern. I have give me your perspective on this. I've had this weird pet theory that I've sort of been nursing over the years after that acquisition. And, it seems because Spotify also bought a podcast service called Anchor around the same time that they bought that. Yep. And, it does seem that like Spotify is attempting to become sort of like or at least what they want to be is like all of your audio is here. And it seems like Soundtrap and Anchor for, music, and I know Soundtrap does a lot with podcasting too, but Anchor and for podcasts and Soundtrap for music are sort of like these democratizing, like, making the creation of these two, types of media like more accessible to everyone, and kind of putting the the power in their hands, and simplifying that and streamlining that process. It seemed to me like maybe at a certain point Spotify was thinking like, okay, if we want to be everyone's audio everything, then we also want to have the creative pipeline in place too, where like people are using our tools basically from like conception of their ideas to the finish of like putting them on our platform and then getting them into people's ears. And maybe they've backpedaled that. I don't know. Am I like reading way too much into that? And do you think there's like room for tools like this? That do you think far down the road we will see some of these tools that even like young students use eventually become easy distribution platforms for them to get their, whether it's music or video or any of their creative ideas, kind of like getting those more directly onto the platforms where people can consume that media? Does that make sense? That was a big question.
No, it's a very good one, and I think you're really, really close to exactly what happened. And I want to qualify everything I'm about to say. I'm not a Spotify employee, I'm not a Soundtrap employee, and I don't have intimate knowledge of what. I kind of have a rough knowledge of what happened. And basically, and it's widely written about, Spotify made $1 billion bet on becoming the podcasting hub that everybody went to. And the reality of it is that most kids consume podcasts now on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And when I talk to my own kids about podcasts, when they say, "Oh, I just saw this amazing podcast," I'm like, "What do you mean saw?" And they go on YouTube immediately and they're watching crime podcasts, they're watching Joe Rogan, they're watching whoever, but it's all like Tom Segura comedy podcasts, they're all on YouTube. And so the bet that Spotify made was, let's do podcasting. Podcasting on Soundtrap came about right around the time before they acquired them. And so you're right, they wanted it to be an all-in-one platform where you could create and distribute and listen. And when, just look at Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, they spent God knows how much money to get those two to make podcasts, and they made one, and that was the end of it. I think that had a lot to do with it, that the sad part of huge tech companies like that, and the sad part of my company and every company, is that it all comes down to the numbers at the end of the day. And are you profitable? And I think that the combination of those things where it didn't work, the experiment did not work. YouTube has basically triumphed in the podcast space. It was a moment for Soundtrap to say, hey, maybe we should go back to our roots and do what we originally set out to do, which is be an amazing tool for all kids to be able to make music anywhere, anytime.
Yeah. Cool. Interesting to get your take on that, for sure. All right. Well, here's another one that I'd love your perspective on. Berklee's digital instrument degree was a headline that came out in the past couple of months. What do I make of that? What is the meaning of that?
Well, I think it's amazing, and I do have a lot of friends at Berklee, so I'll qualify that. But I think it's the button pusher degree, if you will. So the much maligned term button pusher, which is basically kids who are using Ableton, they're using Logic, they're completely into, electronic music and the production of, and there's so many great teachers out there that do this with their students, Will Kuhn being one of them, Ryan Van Bibber. There's some really great people doing some really great things with, button pushing, if you will. So they've got an Ableton Push, they've got a Novation Launchpad. And, where do these kids go to school when they're done? If you're like really, really good at making beats and songs and remixes in Ableton, and you're an 18-year-old, well, your options are very limited. So this digital instrument degree, which is really these electronic digital instruments, meaning a Novation Launchpad, an Ableton Push, digital turntables, those kind of things, it's awesome that these kids finally have a place where they can go and learn more, rather than, it being a quote unquote hobby, because, what parent's going to say, well, you're a button pusher, there's no degree for it, so go get a degree, and you can't. So I think it's great. I hope that many more institutions follow suit I think it's a long time coming. If you think about, like, the reason I didn't major in synthesizer back in 1988 at Montclair State is there was no synthesizer degree. You had to be a classical pianist. That was it. And there wasn't even a jazz piano degree where I went to school. So it's about time that they opened the doors, widened the tent, and let more kids into that, into a music degree that might lead to a teaching degree one day, or might lead to them being, playing at some huge Coachella festival. I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because I can think of a couple of degree programs that I know of that offer, rather the institutions that offer electronic avenues, whether it's recording technology or otherwise, but that also strangely still have extremely rigorous instrumental or vocal performance requirements to enter into the program, which is a challenge for, I've had the opportunity over the past couple of years to start expanding. My private studio is still largely classical percussion, but I have worked with some students who are trying to kind of get their foot in the door and, in one of these digital music jobs, starting with, finding the right program that has the right focus on the kinds of things they want to do creatively and professionally. And that has been a barrier that I don't think needs to exist in some cases.
Correct. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it, again, make the tent as big as possible is what my philosophy is.
Totally. All right. This next one I threw in here is Zoom sync jamming. Have you tried it?
I haven't tried it, but what I'm skeptical of it. Let's put it that way. Because,
Me too.
for most, there is a product out there called real-time audio. It's fantastic, right? It is basically a box that a mini audio interface, if you will, that completely eliminates the delay. And that is, even I read the specs on it when you sent me this document, and I went and really looked at it. And even if there's like a 2 millisecond delay, it's really hard to do that. We were talking right before the podcast that I'm talking into a microphone and recording in multiple things, and I'm getting a little bit of a slapback, and it's hard. So if you get that tiny delay, it makes it almost impossible to use. But the real-time audio, which if anyone wants to Google it, it is amazing. I was at the NAMM show, and I was watching 4 musicians, one of them being Victor Wooten, jamming, and they were all in different countries, and there was no delay, absolutely no the zero latency. It was incredible. And so while Zoom sync jamming is definitely a really big step, until you eliminate the latency to zero, most musicians would be like, it's pretty good. However, that being said, wouldn't it have been awesome to have that when we were trying to rehearse choirs and band over Zoom? Yes, it would have been a huge improvement, but it still wouldn't have been exactly right.
Right.
No matter what happens, you're bound by the Wi-Fi speed, and unless you have some type of hardware that's correcting it, it's very difficult.
Totally. All right. Well, I haven't tried it yet either, but yeah, it does appear very much to be like the 2020 dream. But yes, all right. Well, if I do try it, I will certainly report back. But yeah, that was kind of my gut take on it too. But wanted people to know at least that it's there, and one of the most successful video conferencing platforms.
Absolutely.
All right. This is probably the news announcement I threw in here that there's the most room for me to misunderstand, but it's also potentially the most exciting. So you posted on your blog somewhat recently about school music license. Do you want to explain this?
Yeah, so for years and years and years, there's been no official way for a school to get a blanket license to be able to use music without writing, asking for permission from multiple publishers, multiple copyright owners. Like, for example, if you go to a church or a house of worship anywhere in the United States, there's a license called CCLA that covers, if you go to, like, a friend of mine plays in a band at a mega church and they play like pop music in the church, right? And so are they licensing that? Is that allowed? I don't know. Well, CCLA does. If you pay an annual CCLA license, you can do that. My mother owns a dance studio. And so they use music that the kids know all the time, and we use it at the recital. Is that allowed? Well, yes, because she pays ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC licensing, which I made her do, so that she's allowed to play it, so that copyright holders do get some income from the use of their music. But it's never been available at schools. And so this is a blanket school license. It doesn't let you do whatever you want. You can't just immediately go to the photocopier and start, just copying whatever you want. But if you want to do, like, let's say you wanted to make a video and use music in that video, the school music license makes it very simple for you to do it. Rather than having to go and find who all the publishers are, you just go right in and they give you a flat fee and they say, all right, here's what it costs. This has nothing to do with your winter concert or your spring concert or anything like that. This has everything to do with you producing content that you want to release. And it's a fabulous thing. It's also for like online distribution. Hey, I want to put, what composers and copyright owners have done with school groups, putting their copyrighted works in like a concert video, is that those composers then use it for their own purposes. So school music license, which was the brainchild of a lot of people, but Alec Harris at GIA Music is the guy spearheading the effort, is the coolest thing. By the way, almost every other country in the world has it. It was the United States that was one of the last to have an official license that covers the performance of music in a school building.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And I'm happy to hear that it works more or less as I expected.
Yep. It's great. It doesn't give teachers carte blanche to do whatever the heck they want. So either read my blog post or just look up school music license and you'll find out all the information you need.
Cool. And I'll link to both of those in the show notes to this podcast
great.
episode. All right. Well, are there any like recent or otherwise, let's just looking back on 2023, any headlines or updates that I missed that you think are worth talking about before we get to MusicFirst?
Not really. The funny thing about being in the music technology industry is that it feels like it's every day that something, some major announcement comes out. You're like, so I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but there's probably 100 things I could say. But yeah, I think you got it covered.
Well, I linked like 4 or 5 things that I could find that you had shared. This just for MusicFirst updates for this year. And that's not even like all of them. That was just what I could find pretty quickly while I was preparing. Before we dig into some recent features of MusicFirst, you've never been on. I figure like to someone who, there's probably is at least one person listening who maybe doesn't know much about MusicFirst. What is the like elevator pitch for the, the vision and the goals of MusicFirst, how it serves the music education community?
I love doing that. There's my elevator pitch. So MusicFirst is a holistic approach to music education with technology. And in a nutshell, we have 2 platforms. One is MusicFirst Elementary, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and the other is the MusicFirst Classroom. MusicFirst Classroom is, if you can envision Google Classroom built for music teachers. But what makes it very different is that it is first a fully featured learning management system that works really nicely with other ones. So if you have another learning management system, don't worry. What we do that's different than anyone else is that we have a content library that is vast, that covers every aspect of music education. We're talking thousands of lesson plans. We've got about 20-something full year-long courses. So there's curricula, there's lessons, there's tests, there's everything you need in there. And then we have a suite of 12 different software titles. All those software titles are optional. You choose which ones make sense for what you teach. So when people walk up to me at a conference and say, "What is MusicFirst?" my immediate response is, "What do you teach?" Because based on what you teach, we design a custom kind of configuration. So when a middle school band director says, "What is MusicFirst?" we'll say, "Well, do you do performance assessment with your kids?" "Yes, I do." "How many kids do you have?" 140. "Do you do that, individually, or do you want, something that will do it automatically?" "Oh, definitely." So we've got a product called Practice First, which is a performance assessment product that I helped design with a company called Match My Sound. They're amazing. And we also have Sight Reading Factory, and that is a very, very well-known sight reading tool. And then what we do is we combine those 2 software titles with our content library, which contextualizes all that software. And we also have an audio recorder. We have everything you need. And by the way, if you're a middle school general music teacher, it's a completely different configuration. Again, the suite of software that we have covers every aspect of music education. And recently, about 6 months ago, we partnered with our sister company in the UK called Charanga. to create MusicFirst Elementary, which is a complete K-5 spiral curriculum with a suite of 6 software titles that are proprietary in that too. So it's kind of like a lighter version of the MusicFirst classroom, if you will, but the content in that is extraordinary, and we're really proud of it.
Awesome. And speaking as someone who, my experience using MusicFirst is in the general area of things. One of the things that I think about the content, the lesson plans that resonates with me a whole lot is like, sure, like I'm an idea guy. Like I know my sequence, I know what lessons I want, but like sometimes it's the time that it takes to make those lessons logical and beautiful and presentable and engaging to kids. Like it's typing the instructions just right. It's adding the embedded song examples in the YouTube videos. And those lessons in MusicFirst are so great at just kind of drawing in all these different types of media from the web that are all just sort of like embedded right there straight in the sequence when you're going through an assignment. And it's just like really cool. Like like the middle school music technology curriculum that you all have in there is awesome. And it's like really, it's kind of focused on like the past couple decades of American music styles. And so that's really cool too, because then everything is like being tied to a creative project in Soundtrap.
And it was written by a music teacher, right? So we had this guy, Matt Warren, who was up in the Rochester, New York area. And we knew he was doing great things with our tools because we could see what he was doing. And I said, hey, Matt, could you like make a formal course out of this? And he did. And that's what all of our, we're a group of teachers. We're all music teachers. And so the content is classroom tested, if you will. I mean, we've done this with our kids. And yeah, definitely try to make it as little work as possible for the teacher and get maximum impact with the kids.
Sweet. Well, you've had a number of updates this year. Some are new software integrations. Some are new features for the platform. You talked a little bit about elementary. I don't know. I didn't put these in any logical order. Do you want to go at them in any particular way?
I'd love to. I appreciate it. We're always reacting to what our customers are asking us for. That's my primary motivation or primary driving force behind what we do at MusicFirst in terms of updating things, changing things, getting rid of software, adding software. And so if look for a bunch of announcements right at the beginning of January, because we have a couple of more software partners coming on board that I can't talk about right now, but very, very exciting. And it's stuff that teachers have asked us for. But what I can tell you is that aside from MusicFirst Junior, MusicFirst Elementary, which actually replaced a product that we used to have called MusicFirst Junior, which we no longer are supporting. Aside from MusicFirst Elementary, we launched a MusicFirst Recorder, which is actually a software program that allows you to embed a PDF, embed an audio file that goes along with that PDF, whether it's a backing track or a full score, and then the kids can record looking at the PDF. So all you have to do is upload a PDF, and the students, and if you have a backing track, upload that, and then the kids can record themselves over it. That is a huge, something that a lot of teachers asked us for years, the ability to have the PDF right in the kid's face so that they're playing it and seeing it, on the same screen. So that's something we just launched a month or two ago. Really cool. We added the music professor videos from our good friends at Conselmer. They have a really wonderful library of how to put your instrument together, how to make a sound, how to do that. We know that kids are going to YouTube. They'll rent that trumpet and they'll go home and they'll immediately go on YouTube and go, how do I play this thing? Well, the Music Professor videos are really fabulous. We licensed the entire Level 1 library, and they're included now in MusicFirst, which is super exciting. The thing that I'm spending, again, as I alluded to earlier, all of my waking time right now, thinking about, which is fun, is artificial intelligence and how it can be incorporated into tools like ours. We do have the MusicFirst Assistant, which we just launched in October, maybe September. And that's basically a really nice ChatGPT integration so that it's, obviously students found this thing long before teachers did. But what ChatGPT is getting really good at with more and more prompts and people learning how to use it and how to really get the best results from it is MusicFirst Assistant. We added a lesson plan builder, and it's optional. So if you're one of these teachers who goes, I don't want anything to do with this, You don't even have to turn it on the platform. You can leave it off and you'll never see it again. But we do know the feedback that we're getting from teachers is, oh my God, this is so cool. So if you're like, hey, I need to teach a lesson plan on John Philip Sousa and I don't know what to do other than just play his marches for him, you can turn on the MusicFirst Assistant and click and type in John Philip Sousa lesson plan for fourth graders with limited music reading skills. And the more prompts you put in, the better the lesson plan. Know that there are plans for our task generator so that we're currently training our AI implementation. We're training it on all the different software titles. So what that'll mean is not only will you get a lesson plan that gives you content, but it'll say, hey, do you know that you could do a composition project about John Philip Sousa in Soundtrap? And here's the kind of things you can do. So it'll actually give you more advice or more suggestions based on the software, and it'll actually know which software you have, right? And that may not sound that cool, but it is, I promise, because we're in the early testing I've seen. It's just really, really neat that the AI, or large learning model, large language model, it's basically learning what on earth our platform does other than what's, in the ChatGPT database. And we're also doing that with assessments. So you'll be able to say in the MusicFirst Assistant, now that I've done this John Philip Sousa lesson plan for fourth graders, please give me a 10-question quiz, make 5 multiple choice, make 2 fill in the blank, and it'll do that for you. So that's exciting. And I will say that we have a lot more coming. I have a 3-year plan that I'm not going to share because my competitors listen to everything I do. But just know that there's some really exciting things. What I can say in a 10,000-foot view, and this is what I'm most excited about, is that AI and ChatGPT, as one example of a generative pre-trained transformer, is it is really good when it has a lot of data, right? And so ChatGPT, they spent billions of dollars building that thing so that it knew every aspect of the internet. But it doesn't know anything that's in a printed book if it's not on the internet. It doesn't know any spoken history because it only knows what's on the internet. So there's a lot it doesn't know. What we're excited about is that we're training it on our own content, our own software, and the analysis features that you're going to be able to do are really, really exciting. And so without giving too much about what I'm going to do in the software, imagine if you could say, please tell me all of the students who are having difficulty playing their D major scale 2 octaves. And you ask the assistant to give you that information, and it just gives it to you. It says, here are the students. There they are. And you say, well, could you please assign all of those students a 1 octave D major scale with a BPM of 82 and make it due next Friday. And so what you're going to see with AI and what you're going to see in any software tool is that the interaction will be less typing and more speaking and having a conversation with it and being able to do what I just showed you, what I just demonstrated or gave you an example of, and way more stuff than that. But it's very, very exciting. I just did a keynote address for the Association of Music and International Schools in Zagreb, Croatia. I did a whole thing on AI. I had like an avatar of myself talking and all kinds of wacky stuff. There's some really, really cool stuff coming. And I'm very excited. That's what keeps me motivated, engaged, like getting up. A lot of my day is looking at spreadsheets and profits and expense reports and all that. The thing that makes me get up in the morning and go, I love what I do, is the stuff with AI right now. And it's not in any way going to take jobs away from teachers. It's just going to make their jobs a whole lot easier. That is my fervent view on this, is that, teachers and people are going to be amazed at what this can do. And I want to be the company that's leading. I'm doing everything I can to be one of the thought leaders and be the company that steers AI in the right direction for education, rather than these you're going to see lots and lots of things pop up like, hey, you don't need to take piano lessons, just do this. You don't need to, learn how to play the trumpet in 3 hours with this thing. That's all garbage. We all know that. As teachers, we know that all those things are just ways to make money, but the art of teaching and the art of music teaching specifically is a very human thing, and AI is only going to help us be better humans and better teachers.
Awesome. It sounds like so from what you described and what I can see in the release, you're very like smartly and carefully leveraging like what is currently good at, which is this language model aspect of it. Like ChatGPT doesn't like know things about music, but it absolutely like knows how words about music are structured and organized. And so like the fact that like you could just like the fact that I could save seconds, minutes, hours typing out like a bunch of like bullet points in the steps to a lesson plan, or like giving a title. Like one of my biggest technology passions is automation, and you're like throwing that straight into, it's like a clickable thing inside of this powerful tool that educators use. I'm really kind of stoked though about that quiz example you gave, because for me, one of the things that this is something that a lot of web-based and education software doesn't quite do, as well as like my apps that I install directly to my computer, is they don't always provide me with a lot of freedom to automate. I have to kind of work around them rather than with them. I'll use Canvas as an example.
Absolutely. Great example.
So, great example. And they're big, so they can take my punches. So like they're like, I know that they have technology under the hood that if I had access to it, and if it was made more accessible to me, like I could say, okay, like every day I make the same rehearsal grade for my band, but it like wastes so much time doing it, and it's super not fun. And it's definitely not the reason I wake up in the morning, is to like enter rehearsal grades into my grade book. But like this idea of, okay, what if eventually this AI expands from this role of like language automation, but can actually like, I'll put this in terms that maybe teachers can resonate with, like it can click the buttons for you. You know what I mean? Like that idea you shared of like, okay, now make an assignment and assign it this due date. Like those are things that you actually have to like do with your platform manually. It's very cool to imagine that aspect of software being able to be worked with, with an AI, and very cool to hear that that's the direction you're thinking. So
I can tell you for certain that you are going to see this in widespread, right? That the human computer interaction with AI is going to get away from the QWERTY keyboard. And it is possible, I'll make the prediction now in 2023, that keyboards will look back one day and go, like, look at them like rotary phones. Like, do people really use that? Imagine, as voice recognition software gets better and better and better, why not just talk to your computer and tell it what you want it to do? Imagine, how much time would you save doing that? It's incredible. I'd also like to say that there are a lot of AI software tools already in products like MusicFirst, like Sight Reading Factory. They're already doing it. I was in Canva I was playing around with their image generator. There's a lot of AI already being used all the time, and it's been used by Google, Amazon, Facebook, Instagram for years and years and years and years. And now that they've made all their money, they've opened Pandora's box with ChatGPT. But yeah, I think it's going to make the interaction between humans and computers far easier, far less cumbersome, and automation is going to be what AI is bringing to the table. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, I'm very excited to hear that. And you spoke to this, but AI is, of course, because of we're having, this last year of our ChatGPT moment. It's, of course, in the public mainstream going to be thought of as this like language chatbot tool. But yeah, AI is a much more widespread idea. Everything from like when you type the word like show me pictures of dogs into the Apple Photos app and it shows you all your dogs. Like that is AI. Or like when at your phone you take a screenshot and like hold your thumb on a phone number and then all of a sudden your phone can start calling that number. That's all of that. Those bits are AI. But I love this idea of like the keyboard.
Exactly.
And I'm kind of a keyboard wizard. I love that there are moments where I don't have to open my mouth to work with my computers, but I do think that the keyboard is not
exactly.
It's helpful, but it's not the most accessible thing, and it's a turnoff for most. I've got a cool little app I use called Raycast that I put on my Mac, and it is very keyboard centric, and it's definitely like kind of a power usery tool. And one of the things that you can do is it can install these extensions, and somebody made a Canvas extension for it that you install, and you give it the API key from your Canvas settings, And then what it does is I hit Command Spacebar, and instead I programmed it to be, and it's kind of like a spotlight replacement if you've ever used that on the Mac. And I can type in Command Spacebar, type in Canvas, and then it will show me inside of the little box all of my Canvas courses, and I can jump straight to one. And actually I can jump straight to one, but I can also hit the right arrow key and then start seeing like recently due assignments and start like getting kind of, it's sort of like this easier to use and navigate interface for Canvas. But like, if I'm real with myself, it wouldn't stop me from talking about it on my show, but not that many people are gonna like install Raycast on their computer and put an API key into the thing. It would be way better if I could just go into Canvas and click a button and say hey, make me an assignment for rehearsal grade due every weekday from now until June 16th, would be way better.
And that's exactly what you're going to be able to do. Yep. And that's what we're working on. The MusicFirst Assistant, we just put our little pinky toe with the release of the lesson plan. We're planning to do it with our support side as well, so that when if you're for the listeners, if you don't know this already, I'm going to drop a little knowledge on you. When you're doom scrolling through Facebook, and you stop on a picture for 1.2 seconds, Facebook knows that, right? And so what they'll do is immediately start giving you more of that type of content. That's the way it works. That's the way Google works. That's the way Facebook is. Everything works that way, right? So the more it gets to know you, it gets to learn you. So wouldn't it be cool is if you were trying to figure out how to do something on the software, and you were obviously struggling with menus and looking where it is, it says, "Hey, can I help you?" Yeah, I don't know how to do this. Oh, sure, let me show you. And then that's where all of this is going, and it's super exciting.
Were you just segueing on purpose, or is it just coincidence that I have a note in here to do some follow-up from a recent... I have a quick social media thing or two I want to say in relationship to 2 episodes ago. Actually, I guess it'll be 3 episodes ago by the time this releases. But Elisa Jansen-Jones was on. We talked a little bit about social media. But before I get to that, so it sounds like this AI thing, you're already integrating that to some extent, you said, inside of your quiz feature. Like it actually can like set up elements of the quiz, not just like pre-fill text. Did I understand that right?
That is correct. It'll be released hopefully in the spring because we want to make sure that when it comes out, it's right. And so we're also rebuilding the entire platform on the latest code base. And that latest code base, we have to get that finished before we release these new AI features, but they're coming. And it'll definitely be this school year. You'll be able to sit there and say, I'd like a 20-question quiz. I'd like the 10 questions matching, 10, and then tell it on the first section, I'd like it to be all based on Stars and Stripes Forever. And then for, the next 2 questions, I'd like it to be on yes. So you'll be able to create quizzes by describing what you want, and it'll spit it out for you based on the data that's already in the platform.
I'm so happy to hear you're thinking in this direction. That's very cool.
Oh, yeah. And I think anyone in AI or who's thinking about AI for their software who isn't is kind of missing the whole point. You're trying to make it easier for teachers, not, the whiz-bang features that everyone goes, ooh, isn't that cool? That's great, but, you'll forget about it. It's the stuff where, what is my day-to-day need? And I'm telling you, we listen to our customers and they say, hey, this takes me 6 clicks. It would be so much better if it took 2. I can't tell you how much I listen to that a lot. And I'm constantly working with our developers to say, how can we make this easier for the customer?
I'm so glad that is a thing that you're focusing on because, we have a joke in my district that we call Canvas clicks a lot. And it's funny. It's just like one of those features of web software, education software in particular, that is a pain if you have to repeat the same task over and over again. And I love this idea of, what you're thinking with AI, because I'm inclined to always think, I'm a fussy software nerd, but I'm always inclined to think, would I have made this like feature of whatever thing I'm using, like from 6 clicks down to 1. But what you're talking about is actually taking it down from 6 clicks to 0 clicks.
Correct.
Yeah,
that's the goal. that's the dream, and it's possible. That's what's so exciting.
Right on. All right. Well, you said something about social media, so I'm going to just hijack that thought. And I usually do follow up from previous episodes a little more towards the beginning, but I thought I would just throw these 2 things in here real quick. So we did. Elisa Jansen-Jones was on a few episodes ago. Everyone should go back and listen to that episode. And we talked a little bit about social media, and I realized that, with all the shakeup in the social media landscape over the past year. Can I just say I'm sad about Twitter? Just,
Oh, I'm very sad about it. I used to love it. I took my company off of it. I deleted my account. Somebody will write a book about that someday.
I mean, the thing is this, like
If it's not already being written.
Right. Yeah. I'm generally skeptical of all social media, which I expressed with Elisa, and we kind of got into that. But like, I have to recognize that, for all of my criticism of Twitter over the years, it is probably the social media platform that has changed my life the most. Like, it has introduced me to the most people who have influenced my way of life and my thinking and have like made me actually like do things differently than maybe I would have done otherwise. The people that I mostly,
Me too.
I think the original promise of something more like Facebook was like this social utility, like for the most part. I mean, it's evolved a lot, but for the most part, the people who maybe in real life who you're most frequently interacting with. But Twitter is just like that promise of the internet, like, hey, you can like have this funnel. If you have this interest, you can like funnel yourself into people who are not in your area who have that interest. And I just can't express like, I mean, I speak last episode, I actually had my friend Craig McClellan on to talk about new Apple updates. And like we used to have a podcast together. We met on Twitter. Like that's, and like all sorts of people in our circles and, who I meet at conferences and who are like doing awesome things with technology, that a lot of that comes from there. So I'm sad, but I thought that since I'm using Twitter pretty much at zero, that I would at least mention to the listeners of the show that if you want to find me these days, I do actually have a newsletter, an email newsletter, a good old-fashioned email newsletter.
Oh, that's very cool.
I'll link it in the show notes. It is pretty bare bones. It's mostly just like if I publish blog posts and podcast episodes, it pretty much rounds them up in an email. But some people like that. I don't know if you have an RSS reader you use these days. I don't know that many people.
No, I agree. I mean, I gave up all social media. I do have a Facebook page, but I use it for promotion of my company only. And promotion of my blog and my podcast because I've never been happier. I had a huge social media purge. So did my children. It was a wonderful thing because I kind of got my life back and stopped staring at my phone all day. But yeah, I went back to blogging, which is what I started out doing in the mid 2000s, and podcasting, which I've done now. I have my own podcast. I'm coming up to episode 100, so. It's one of these. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. It's a labor of love. You start it, and then you go, well, I got to keep going. And so, but yeah, you talk to great people. But yeah, the glory days, in my opinion, of social media are gone. In terms of networking and things, I'm much more on LinkedIn now than anything else, and even that's starting to become a little bit more like Facebook.
Yep, I hear you. Well, I always end these episodes with some segments and, a music pick of the week, a tech tip pick of the week, and an app pick of the week.
I love this.
Yeah. So I'll do, you want to do music pick first?
Sure.
You surely know who Guthrie Govan is, the electric guitarist.
I do.
I've just, plenty of people have recommended him to me before, and I'm just sleeping on him until he started popping up more and more frequently in my, speaking of algorithms, my Apple Music algorithmic play. He just started popping up more and more frequently. And it's one of those moments where I'm listening to the playlist and it's like, okay, that song. I know these songs. And then something will come on. And every time that one song comes on, I'll think like, gosh, can I run to like my nearest device and see what that is before it stops playing? And more often than not, it's been him. So the album that has been popping up most frequently is actually called Erotic Cakes, which I think is...
Oh, that's great.
And it's just like, there's people who are like at 100 in both like the expressive possibility of their instrument and their technical facility. And he's one of them. I'm floored by every guitar solo that he takes. And I think the album is definitely worth listening to.
All right. Well, I'll give you perhaps a polar opposite, but I'm if anybody knows me, they know that I'm a deadhead. And that that was a whole part of my younger life, and it still is today. But that led me into the world of bluegrass and other music. So the thing that's on my top Spotify track the last 2 weeks has been Sierra Hull. Sierra Hull is an amazing mandolin player. And there is a track on YouTube of her playing with Corey Wong and the Wongsters, playing this funk track. I cannot get enough of it. So if you look up, and I can send you the link, Robbie, Sierra Hull with Corey Wong and the Wongsters.
So we saw her live with him.
Oh, well, I think she's phenomenal. And I think with Corey Wong, it's just a match made in heaven.
it was a great show. She opened and then of course played in his band for a couple of tunes.
Ah, that's great. I love her. I think she's great. I mean, I'm into Billy Strings and Green Sky Bluegrass and Yonder Mountain String Band. I really love bluegrass, but Sierra Hull is my new favorite, and I've been listening to a lot of stuff that she's been playing on.
And if we really liked, we saw her at a fairly small venue with her, doing her bluegrass thing as a solo act a handful of years ago, and we really just loved it. Like, she gets such a great tone quality out of the instrument and writes great songs.
And she's just happy. You just smile when you watch her because she just seems so happy to be playing.
And something that's cool is Corey Wong's alto saxophone player in that band is named Eddie Barbash, who I actually just saw guest play with Wolfbeck in New York City this past weekend.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, and he is like, he's like unstoppable. I think he plays in the Colbert band, and he like has collaborated a lot with Sierra Hull and does like it's unfathomable how he gets the style of the picking correct on the alto saxophone. I don't know many people who can do that on a wind instrument, but you can see YouTube a couple of videos of just the two of them doing a couple of standards, bluegrass standards, and it's wild what he gets out of that instrument. It's cool. Well, I'm going to do a tech tip, I guess, next. And I blogged about it. I'll include a link to that in the show notes. I got a new phone this fall, and there's a new button on the new iPhone. It replaces the mute switch, and I have had a lot of fun programming that button because Apple provides a nice user interface for you to decide what that button does. It can open the camera, it can mute the phone, it can take a quick note, but you can also assign it to a shortcut in the Shortcuts app. And so I am building a mega shortcut that like changes what that button does depending on which focus mode my phone is in, and it's a trip.
Yeah, I don't have the new iPhone, so that sounds pretty cool. So I have this is going to seem kind of lame, but I love the Chrome browser plugins that are available for music. And what my tip is, if you Google, or if you're in the Chrome browser and you Google Chrome plugins music, there is one that is called Music Speed Changer. And so plugins, just so people don't, if you don't know, there are browser plugins, web extensions, if you will. And what Music Speed Changer does is no matter what window you have open, so if you're on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you are, if you open up the Music Speed Changer, you can transpose it, you can slow it down, speed it up, and it doesn't, the speed changer does not affect the pitch, which is extraordinary. And the transposing is just amazing. Again, it's free. It comes in the Chrome browser. You just have to say, I want it, and say add. But yeah, Music Speed Changer is one of those, in terms of a tech tip, please go and look. Your Chrome browser is so amazing when you start adding these extensions to make it more music friendly.
This is cool. I use one called Transcribe, but this one looks like it might integrate with a couple more things.
Yeah, I use it on YouTube all the time. If I'm learning a keyboard solo and I'm just like, let me make sure I can see that keyboard's hands, I'll slow it down, and it affects the video too, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. Very, very cool. All right, I'm going to have to install this as soon as we get off the line here. Do some testing. Well, the thing too is, like, it says here it works with Apple Music. I don't know if Transcribe does, the one I use, but it would be useful to take some of the tracks I have in my Apple Music library that are like things I imported into the library that are not in anyone's streaming database, and be able to perform these kinds of speed actions.
Yeah, it's basically a filter between the raw file and your speaker, right? On your computer or your headphones, and it's really cool. I love the thing.
Awesome. That's good to know. Okay, cool. I didn't realize that was how they worked. Cool. Well, I'll do an app pick of the week here. So I'm a big task management app nerd, and I've surveyed them all, especially the ones that are on Apple platforms. I have used quite a lot of OmniFocus over the years, and Things by Cultured Code. And there's one feature that not a lot of these apps get right is collaboration. And I had a student teacher this past fall, and we used Todoist to share a simple collaborative task list. And we're just talking, like it's a to-do app with your projects and headings and subheadings and lists within projects. You can attach files to tasks, all sorts of things. But most importantly, you can assign a person to a task and both have access to the due dates. So this was like really helpful for communicating, because there's just a lot of moving parts to teaching, and it can be a lot for someone who's never been full-time in a classroom to manage. And I just feel like the clarity of like what things were happening both in the curriculum, but also just in like the everyday logistic tasks. I just think like being able to share that knowledge between ourselves and like both be typing into that same list and checking off each other's tasks was a thing that made an otherwise tough to manage responsibility much easier for both of us.
That's very cool. There are a lot of paid, web things that we use, things like Trello boards, if you will, where you can do similar things, but it's great when it's on an app so that it's right there on your phone. But yeah, anyway, so my app pick of the week is I've been playing around with the new music AI tool from Google. They have a project called the AI Test Kitchen. I just did a blog post about this. It's called MusicLM. And I don't know if it's music language model. It probably is. But basically, it's a text-to-music tool. By the way, you have to request access to it or get on the waiting list. I flexed my, I'm a professor at Teachers College Columbia, so I got right in. It is, I'm going to say that, but it is definitely worth playing around with. So what you do is you say, write me a song that is a happy and sounds Bulgarian, right? And it will do its best to create a short, minute-long song that does that, but it's based on your text. So I think it's a really cool idea to get younger students who may not, take pictures at an exhibition and you always see the picture and then try to tell what the story is from looking at the picture, or hear the music and try to come up with the story. This is exactly the opposite. So you could actually write a story, a short poem or something, and put it in and see what MusicLM comes up with. It's got a really neat kind of reinforcement that you're actually helping the Google LM, the MusicLM tool. There's it gives you 2 tracks and you click on a trophy for which one you think is better. And you're actually, you're helping the AI model figure it out. But yeah, so it's called MusicLM, and that's what I've been playing with. The music that comes out is not fantastic, but it's just really interesting to me how it can convert a sentence immediately into music.
Yeah, I'm curious about this too with regards to notation. And I've talked about this on here before with, I think most recently with David McDonald, this idea that there are things that things I look for in a piece of music for say my 6th grade band. If you study the music closely, eventually there are formulas you can find. I don't know that I want anyone other than a person writing music, but it's interesting to think that there could be potential things that we could play, whether they're exercises or technical drills, things that maybe notation could be doing for us. And actually, because of XML, I know some people who have shared some results with me of trying to get ChatGPT to actually just make an XML file, like a music XML file, and then they've tried to boot it into Dorico and see what it shows up. Nothing that's going to get you anywhere if you're looking to get some serious work done, but it gets you more than nowhere, and it's pretty impressive to I think someone I know tried to have it write them a D major scale in Music XML, and what the software opened was nothing.
Right.
So I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, watch this space over the next few months. That's going to come. It's just a matter of time before it comes out.
Right on. Well, I think that about closes it. Is there anything you wanted to say before we hop off the air here?
No, I really enjoy the opportunity to be on this side of the mic, Robbie, and I have a lot of respect for what you do. I think you're a fantastic music educator, and it's nice knowing that there are music teachers out there doing these types of podcasts. And I just really am happy to be interviewed rather than doing the interviewing. You were on my podcast a couple of years ago. It's really nice, and I really thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what I love.
Yeah, I promise that it will not be this long before you come back.
I appreciate that, Robbie. That's great.
I'm Robbie Burns. Thanks for listening to Music Ed Tech Talk. You can find the show's page, show notes for this episode, and my blog at musicedtechtalk.com. You can subscribe to blog posts through an RSS app of your choice, and you can subscribe to the podcast in a podcast app of your choice. You can now get blog posts delivered right into your email inbox once a week. Please rate and review this show in the podcast app. It absolutely helps. Word of mouth is helpful too, so please spread the word about it. You can learn more about my music and teaching career at robbieburns.com. I'm all over the internet at Robbie Burns or _Robbie Burns on most social media sites, on Mastodon, I'm Robbie at social.musicedtechtalk.com. Consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/musicedtechtalk. All tiers get perks, but even the base tier gets you access to the Music Ed Tech Talk Discord community, where you can chat with other supporters and guests of the show about music, apps, pedagogy, lesson ideas, tech support, and more. It's a fun place to be, and I hope to connect with you there. Thanks to this episode's sponsor, Scale Exercise Play Along Tracks. Be sure to check it out. See you next time.